Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Cooking with Big Mark.
Well, today we're going to be talking about a great dish for comfort this time of year, baked macaroni and cheese. And if I can use a little musical introduction based on the old standard SMA Mucho, we'll say, bechamel, bechamel mucho, the white sauce that delights your taste buds if it's done right. Bechamel, bechamel mucho. Without Saint no white sauce, you ain't doing it right. So that's what we're talking about. That's the introduction. In mucho, we need mucho sauce so it doesn't get dry. And how do you do that? You have to make a bechamel sauce, which is nothing but the basic white sauce. Bechamel is one of the 5 of the French mother sauces from French cuisine. And I think next session we do, I'm going to be talking about the 5 other sauces. What they are is bechamel. Then the one that's closest to it is velouté, which is done with the same roux that we make, which I'll discuss in a minute. Except instead of milk or cream, you add stock, chicken stock or seafood stock. Then you have hollandaise, which is a great blend of egg and butter emulsion. Then you've got Espagnole, which is the brown sauce that's made with bones and stock, gelatin, and so on and so forth. Or anything around beef, lamb, or other things, heavy livestock sauce. And the final one is, of course, tomato sauce, which is garlic, onions, tomatoes, and olive oil. So what we're talking about is white sauce, bechamel. It's basically just a mixture, equal parts of butter and flour, put into a saute pan or saucepan. And you want to cook it down a little bit so that it takes on a color like a light brown or beige. And what you're doing is sort of cooking out the raw flour taste of it. And when it gets to that point, you want to have milk, cream, half and half, whatever you're going to use. Whole milk is what most people recommend. And you put that in, and you want to have a whisk of some kind. And you're putting it in slowly, adding it to it, whisk it so that you don't end up with any lumps. Some people like to add a little nutmeg to the white sauce, which is fine. When I do it for mac and cheese, I like to add a little Worcestershire because it gives another little dimension of flavor. So you stir it, and you can remember whenever you're using any kind of starches or additives like cornstarch, whatever, it doesn't really thicken until it comes to a boil. So you want to do that. Then when it comes, turn it down right away, stir it, keep the lumps out. And you get the right consistencies. You put a spoon in it, the back of a spoon, and and it clings to it, or you run your finger down, you see a little trench. That's about the right consistency. You don't want it too thick because you're going to have something, the pasta will have a little starch on it as well. So that's the start of it. And as far as the cheeses go, once you get your white sauce made, then you want to have usually 2 cheeses. You have one that's melting cheese, could be like Fontina, Gruyere, Emmentaler, Port Salut, Bel Paese, almost any of those soft style cheeses, even mozzarella, which doesn't have much flavor in it, but certainly you get that long strand of cheese show coming on when you pull it out. Then you want a good hard cheese, like cheddar, and that's most people recommend, cheddar style cheeses, which have strong cheddar, and that's where you get your flavor. And grate those on a box grater yourself. Don't buy that packaged stuff. It's got a sort of a repellent on it so the cheeses don't clump together in the packaging, and as a result, it doesn't melt properly when you're putting it in the sauce. So just get a grater out. It's good exercise, and it's great. Whatever you need, and add it in there, and you get the real flavor of the cheese. So 2 kinds of cheese, usually 1.5 cups of each kind can be added. Something new that a lot of people are doing now is adding cream cheese to give it a little extra richness, like 4 ounces, and just put, at the end of just take that and meld it in the same way as the other cheeses. Now at that point, you have, I assume, cooked your pasta. And the kind of pasta you want it to be some sort of either a ridged or tubular pasta. It's going to absorb the sauce. Rotini, I don't think, Orchetti I think is too small. Orzo was obviously too small. And ziti is kind of big. You want something sort of in the middle. And if it says in the package to cook 8 to 10 minutes, I would cook it around just the 8, not 10. It says 10 to 12, cook it at 10, because you're going to be cooking it again. And you don't want it to turn to complete mush. So that's when you put it. Now, where I'm making this, I would make it today, but I'm going to be planning on serving it tomorrow. It's like everything else, lasagnas, stews, any kind of a mixture that has a melange of ingredients and flavors. It's much better the next day when what goes on overnight between all the ingredients. Excuse me. But somehow it always tastes better and sweeter the next morning, the next day. So you can put it in your pan, add a little away. You can add the topping to it then, or you can do the topping in the morning. Toppings can be as simple as cracker crumbs. It can be soft breadcrumbs mixed with a little olive oil and parsley. It could be Parmesan and panko mix. It could be panko and other kinds of sort of cheese. It can be saltines. It can be cornflakes. It can be whatever you like to give you a little crunch on the top. And I think a lot of people add some Parmesan cheese on the top as well if it's not in the crumb mix. Then it goes in the refrigerator. You can, if you want to do some frozen or freeze up to 2 months, it'll keep in the refrigerator 3 or 4 days with no problem. When you take it out to the refrigerator, you want to take it out like a half hour beforehand, let it come up to room temperature a little bit, then just bake it for 30 or 40 minutes at 350. And you've got a perfect, creamy, comfortable dish. And the reason the bechamel, the white sauce, is so important is a lot of thin sauces or no sauces, because everything gets absorbed by the pasta and the result comes out very dry, especially if it's made ahead of time. So what you want is the creaminess, silkiness, the smoothiness of a good cheese cream. And we will talk about the other sauces in a week. So on these cold days, dig yourself into a nice, comfortable outfit and have some mac and cheese that's really mac and cheese, the way it should be.
I was on mute. All right, so speaking of things that are seasonally and weather appropriate, it's not a blizzard here in Chicago, but it is still snowing. It snowed. It's been snowing since yesterday evening. Something delicious to enjoy under such conditions: a little port, and this is a Coburn's Ruby Port. Some of those port names are the port house names are a little difficult to pronounce, but it's Coburn, not Cockburn. And this is their fine Ruby Port. Ruby Port is distinguished from Tawny Port based on aging. Ruby Port is not particularly aged. Sometimes, it's a matter of months, and it can be done in stainless steel or in wood, but you're still talking about, it's a young product. Same grapes, you'll see Touriga Nacional, Tinticao, et cetera, but it's just a younger version. So you're going to get much more in terms of fruit notes as opposed to the aged notes you get from something that's aged in wood. So it's not that caramel, toffee, vanilla-y kind of situation. It's much more, it's tannic. So the tannins have not kind of mellowed out over time, and it's very fruit forward. Very almost like you think about an unripe strawberry or an unripe raspberry, but it's really a beautiful supple nose. Just kind of invites you right in. It feels very, very, what's the Finnish word? Hygge, very comforting. And then on the palate, you're getting kind of that little, I'd say a melange of unripe strawberry and stewed fruit. It's a really satisfying kind of antithesis situation going on there. And this would just be a nice thing to enjoy in front of the fire or looking out the window at the winter wonderland. And because it is fortified to stop fermentation, and originally was fortified because it was being shipped from Portugal to Britain, and otherwise it would have spoiled in steerage. Is it steerage on the ship? You don't want to have like 5 glasses of it, but a nice glass would be very satisfying on a day like this. So I thought that I would bring it into the mix. Thank
Well,
you.
There's certainly English oriented. I've been through, I've been to a port. We flew up when we were in Portugal. And we went to the Port Wine Institute. I flew up with my niece. And I had arranged to have lunch there with all the wine, the port ledges, lodges, they call them, up on the Douro River, are all, most of them all were English. And that's, they made it, they shipped most of their product to England. Sandeman, Cochran's, Symingtons, these are all people that are all English. It was interesting. There were no females at this time. This may have changed now. That's, I'm talking back in the early 80s.
Well, one would hope.
Yeah, that there was no females ever allowed into the Port Wine Institute. And what they would, was control a lot of the marketing of it, but they'd have a lunch every week where one of the heads of one of the lodges would bring in wines, and they'd all sit down and then figure out who it was, what it was, and, sort of critique it. But they served, Bordeaux with dinner and with the lunch rather. And Nicole couldn't go with me. She went to lunch with it. We met a couple from Canada, and he and I went to it. And his wife and Nicole went out to lunch somewhere else. The only woman that was ever allowed in it, and this happened once, was the Queen of England when she came to Portugal. She was allowed into it. And the only female that ever graced the portals of the Wine Institute. So it's fascinating. They have a library that they keep when they ship things around the world. They'll hold back one bottle. And they keep it there in case somebody complains about, the sea changing, that slosh around, whatever, especially on the on those that are vintage years. Well, it's a very fascinating hierarchy of people, and certainly built into the culture of Portugal, but it's really very much English oriented, as is the Bordeaux wine industry in France. The Plantagenets were the ones that supported all that at the beginning. So. Anyway, that's a little sideline.
No, it's interesting. The reason that the British started importing wine from Portugal was that they were in conflict with the French and therefore couldn't get their little grubby hands on the French wine.
Yeah.
Not to be anti-English. I'm just kind of chewing on the no women policy, and it makes me angry. But
well, those are stories. I attended that famous Merchant Taylor's dinner you heard me speak about it in London, where I had port. Incidentally, at the end, I had the dregs of the port that they were in for dinner, and it's like chewing on that. Those dregs were really dregs, but that affair again. That was even in the '60s. There were no women allowed at that either. It was a celebration of the world's of sixes and sevens. And the two guilds, the Merchant Tailors and the Merchant Furriers, was to have fights over it. And that's how they came. When you say the world, the sixth and seventh, that's what they're talking about, is that conflict in the order of the parade on every year in London.
Oh, interesting.
And they decided they got together and attended themselves a dinner on Whit Sunday and the Feast of St. John the Baptist. And they would alternate on years instead of going to have bloody battles, which they're doing among the guilds. In those days, they would shift. One would be 6 one year, and then go 7, and the other next year they shift. And the only time that it would be get away from that when the Lord Mayor of London was of the guild, they would have precedence for that year. And nobody can eat, drink, smoke, or anything until they have a toast to the Queen. So she wasn't there in person, but
she was there in spirit.
There you go.
There you go. All right. Well, this has been Cooking with Big Mark, and we'll see y'all soon.
Very good.